Well, right around 2000, 2001, those discounts slowly dried up. At that point, they had put a lot of independent bookstores out of the market. They were the dominant players in many communities. And now if you go into one of those stores, they still have some titles that they discount about 10%, but it's a much smaller number of sort of bestsellers, and that's it. You know, and what we have seen is that that goes on throughout. As these companies gain ground and there's no longer any meaningful competition, those price breaks began to disappear. A study in Nebraska found that Walmart's prices on groceries were as much as 25% higher in some stores than in others. And if you looked, those were the places where there weren't independent grocery stores left. So even as consumers, I think we should be really concerned about this. One of the biggest myths about the rise of large national chains is that their growth was driven solely by consumer choices. What I found in my research and what I document in the book is that government policy has also played a major role in the growth of these companies. Every year in this country, cities and counties give away hundreds of millions of dollars in development subsidies for new shopping centers and big box stores. And this is where, you know, Target goes into a community and says, we want to open this new store and it's going to create all these new jobs and this tax revenue. Never mind if those arguments are true, but that's what they sell local officials on. And they said, well, we're not going to do it unless you give us a $7 million tax break, you know, unless you give us a subsidy. These companies are experts at picking up those subsidies, and they do so all across the country. A recent study found that Walmart had picked up over $1 billion in local government subsidies just in the last few years. Astounding. And you know, as an independent business owner, you could come to City Hall and say, you know, I'm thinking about expanding. Can I have a $50,000 tax break? Right? I mean, you're going to be laughed out of the room, and they're going to explain to you that this is a free market. Well, it's not really a free market if you're competing against a company that's benefiting from enormous subsidies. As I document in the book, that's not the only way that we help these companies out. Many states have huge loopholes in their corporate income tax structures that allow retailers that operate across state lines to escape paying state income taxes on their earnings. Independent businesses in those states cannot do that. There are many ways in which our zoning laws and our local development policies have also helped and underwritten the growth of these companies at the expense of independent businesses. Here in New York, I think some of the most glaring examples are the Empire Zone tax credits that the state has created. Not all of those zones, of course, but quite a number of them. The benefits are going to retail developers and big box stores that are going into those zones, really adding nothing at the end of the day to the local economy, but benefiting from huge tax breaks along the way. So the trends of the last 20 years have been disturbing, but trends are not destiny. And indeed, all across the country right now, there is growing awareness and activity at the community level to reverse these trends. And I think what's happened just in the last few years is really encouraging. More and more people are waking up to the hidden cost of big box retail and to what it is that we risk losing if we lose independent businesses. In the last 3 years, over 200 communities have said no to shopping center and big box projects that have been proposed. And a growing number of places are looking more closely at the kinds of policies that they have in place. Getting rid of those subsidies and tax advantages for big box stores. Arizona this year, for example, passed a law prohibiting subsidies for retail development. And that really happened largely because of an independent business alliance that formed a few years ago in Arizona and began lobbying the state government and saying this is a gross unfairness that this goes on. And you know, many people had been saying that for a long time, but when the independent business owners spoke up, it really changed the political dynamics around that issue. Suddenly lawmakers really heard that and they really saw it for what it was, as a marketplace unfairness. Many places are also, Massachusetts this year closed a huge tax loophole that had been benefiting chains. Again, it was independent business owners in alliances like this one who really spoke up and made a difference there. Communities are also looking at their zoning policies, not allowing just sort of endless retail development on the outskirts, but saying, you know, we really ought to support our existing commercial districts, the places that are already developed, where we already have independent businesses, that's really where our focus ought to be in terms of future growth, so that we're not simply moving the commercial district somewhere else and undermining all of the investment that's gone on in those existing districts. Last year in my home state of Maine, we passed a landmark law called the Informed Growth Act, which requires that communities look at the economic impacts of large retail developments before they say yes. You know, traditionally we've only looked at, well, you know, how many parking spaces does it have to have, and do they have to plant new trees in the parking lot? I mean, those have been the kind of discussions that go on about these projects in many planning boards across the country. And what this new law in Maine says is that you also need to look at the economic impacts. How will this affect existing businesses? How will it affect jobs? Yes, it'll create new tax revenue, but what's it going to cost in terms of new public services that we have to provide? So that cities really have not just what developers are telling them, but they really have independent facts and information about the full range of effects, and so that they can make informed decisions about whether to proceed. Many communities are also looking at their economic development resources and sort of saying to themselves, you know, we have been spending all this money trying to lure in outside companies. What if we took all of those dollars that we're spending and instead put them into programs to develop a new generation of local entrepreneurs? And in fact, we have seen in the last few years growing numbers of new independent businesses starting up. We've had over 300 new independent bookstores start in this country since 2005. We've got new independent pharmacies. Ace Hardware, which is, as you know, a co-op of independent hardware stores, reports that a couple of years ago, for the first time in memory, they actually broke even in terms of membership. That is, that they had as many new independent hardware stores are opening now as they have that are closing. That's still not where we want it to be, but it's a big change over what was happening 10 years ago. And I think some of that is due to the fact that communities have really recognized the value of independent businesses and that there is more focus on that kind of development. Lastly, is the growth, the thing I think is probably most encouraging out there is the growth of independent business alliances. Independent business alliances have now formed in over 60 communities around the country over the last few years. These are alliances that have anywhere from 100 to 800 independent business owners that come together mainly around the idea of doing public education, getting the message out that there are hidden costs and that there are real benefits to your local economy, that people have choices, and that the choice to choose an independent business generates real economic and community benefits for the place that you live, and to think about what your options are when you're out shopping and about a difference that makes. Independent business alliances do this through, you know, having buy local materials in their stores, posters, running ads, talking to their customers. And we're seeing already that they, in communities where they've been going for a while, they've really had a profound impact and a measurable impact on spending choices. 2 studies have now looked at the impact of these campaigns and have found that people have, in fact, shifted their spending to a measurable degree to independent businesses as a result of these efforts. I've seen it in my own community. We started the Portland Independent Business Alliance in Portland, Maine a couple of years ago. We have about 200 members now and growing every month. And we've just been getting the message out. People, messages, we have thank you cards on the countertops of local businesses. You flip them over and they say thank you for supporting this independent business. Here's one of the reasons that that's so important. Because you keep more dollars in the local economy, because it builds community, those kinds of things. We have posters all over town. We have a website that has a directory of local businesses, so when people are thinking about, well, I need a toy for a niece's birthday party, where can I go and get that locally? They can log on to our site and find an independent business that offers that kind of good or service that they're looking for. We run ads in local papers. We have events to bring people out where we can have speakers or social events. We did one this year. We did the Indie Biz Awards, where we actually set up a website And we had over 3,000 people in the community, which is pretty big for a town our size, vote on their favorite local businesses and the businesses that had given back